Welcome to the Profile Series. My name is Terry Duenas, and we are here for a very special half hour. We are going to talk with some folks, and we're lucky enough to meet here on and record this on Martin Luther King's birthday, January 15th. And we are going to discuss Dr. King. We're going to discuss his legacy. We're going to discuss why he is important, why the holiday continues to be important for us to study. And we're going to talk about a variety of things, all kind of wide open. And we're here with a couple of folks. I've known MaryAnn Baboza for a number of years and the work that she does. It's hard to exactly describe what your work is, MaryAnn, because I know you're a civil rights and a human rights advocate and activist.
Absolutely.
And to say that activist may ring a little 60s, but it's absolutely important, and it's what you do and what you are, and you always have been. And also, Jimmy, we're very happy to have you. Mr. Jimmy Little is here, and we're going to discuss the impact of Dr. King and his legacy. And in just talking before the show, we decided we can't do this in a short period of time. We're going to be doing some ongoing discussions through the next months, and hopefully we're going to talk about, at one point, we're going to talk about Black History Month and its impact on society. So I want to welcome you both. Thank you for giving up your time and coming in to talk. And I know, MaryAnn, from knowing you in the past, we're going to get the truth. Nothing but the truth. And it's very difficult. Let me just kind of throw out one of the first things that we talked about is why is it important for us to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday on this this year? We know that there's the holiday that celebrates his birthday, and he was on the scene, on the national scene, for what seems like a very, very short time. I mean, he was assassinated when he was 39 years old. And really, why is it important for us to celebrate that?
Number one, what he believed in and what he was doing. He was a hard fighter. He believed in truth, he believed in freedom, equality, and he wasn't afraid to stand up and go for it. And I think it's important to celebrate the holiday so our young people understand what people did for them, and it was done for them.
Wonderful.
And unfortunately, we don't celebrate his holiday enough. I mean, in an open, I think when his holiday, as today,
sure,
what we should be doing is teaching our young people, having some kind of programs today, showing the young people what he did, what he went through, being stabbed, being put in jail, everything to give them the right to vote, to walk down the street. All the freedoms that they take for granted now is because of his works. And we need to celebrate this holiday.
Boy,
he deserves it.
Boy, you're so right on that, and it's a situation that, do you feel that most of the young people today just don't understand the way the situation was in 1963 and in 1965 and 68?
No, they don't, and that's our fault. And that's our fault as a community, our community leaders. I think we are so busy trying to show how we all get along and how everything is okay. And in reality, it's not okay. Because if you don't understand your past and you don't educate yourself about your past, you're doomed to repeat it. And so nobody ever wants to talk about the race issues that are still alive and well. But if our children understood exactly where they came from, what people did to overcome those negativities during that time, then they'll learn how to overcome their negativities. They'll understand, they'll follow their strength. Right now, they have no one. Because the leaders of today are so busy concerning themselves with their positions, and are they going to lose their positions if they speak out?
There you go.
So our children are not taught. And it's sad. I mean, thankfully, my children know, because I made it a point that my 3 sons, we talked about everything. And it's important for them to know how valuable they are. You know, and I think, you look at the kids of color in this town. When you have a town that tells them they're not welcomed and not valuable, then you have their leaders telling them they're not valuable, and they tell them in such a way by not standing up fighting for them, they're not valuable. So the young kids decide. I'm sorry.
No,
I get wrapped up with this.
It's just what we want to hear. It's just what needs to be said. Jimmy, as a young black man in 1960s, what did you know of Dr. King back in the 60s?
I knew that I went in the military in 1960. I stayed in the military for 6 years, and all during the time that I was in the military, I recognized that Martin Luther King was struggling and fighting and making his goal to me was equality. Not a separate equality, but a unified equality for your community, for your neighborhood, not just for blacks, but for whites also. But I found out in the 60s, had he not been a fighter, things would have went way, way awry. And as he was a fighter, they still went awry.
Sure. Because
like my sister said, there wasn't enough stand up, and present it. You see black on black crimes. And the black on black crimes came from one person feeling like they were better than the other, and so they would take advantage of the other, versus knowing that, hey, I shouldn't harm you no more than you should harm me, because we're in this fight together. We're in the struggle together. Back then there were, like I said, I was in the military. But when I got out of the military in 1967, there was a large influx of groups that came out to support his dream and to protect. There was the Panthers. There was in Worcester. There was a group called the New American Blacks. And everywhere you went, there was a group to stand up. But as his dream came to fruition, the leaders that took over, they became interested in their position and not the group or the body as a whole. And so things went down, down, down.
Yeah.
I don't want to make too much noise because I might lose my job or I might lose my position. I'll stand up and fight to a certain degree, but that's it.
Interesting.
And I think what's sad about that, as my brother was saying, what is so sad when you look at our leaders of today, is that you can discuss black issues, be proud of who you are, love who you are. It does not mean that I dislike you, that I don't want to share in your culture.
Sure.
When I discuss things, people in the community look at me as, oh, she's too radical. Not at all. I just believe in my blackness. I am a black woman. I want you and everyone else to enjoy my culture. I want my children to understand you have a wonderful, rich culture. Celebrate it. There's nothing wrong with it.
Beautiful.
We celebrate each other's. And when there's a racial issue going on, deal with it to the core. Don't go halfway to just compromise to appease everybody.
Right.
Vindicate that child. Make that child who was harmed or that person of color who was done an injustice, stand up for them truly. I don't care how loud you have to get, bring it to a close. But instead, what we have is half-stepping, just enough to please everybody. Now,
we sugarcoat the issue to get along.
Exactly, and to me...
Do we find that with even our black leaders today?
Some of them, especially locally. Especially locally. I think, and I can speak better locally because this is obviously where I've had my experiences. And you know, they'll go halfway and stop. I mean, I have been wanting for years. I look at a lot of the young black men who are now in their 20s, 30s. There are so many of them who, half of them, have been in a police car. And what they were charged for, disorderly conduct and trespass. Those are the two charges they throw on these young kids just from being on Main Street and everything else, because it's a charge that can stay in the courts for months and months and months. Then their attorney or whoever it is say, oh, let's just take a plea. Next, and no parent and a lot of these kids didn't want to fight it, so they would take a plea. Next thing you know, they're settled with a record that should not be there. Well, from being on Main Street.
For doing nothing.
Exactly, because they know it's something that you have to fight a long time to prove your innocence.
Right.
Now, instead of all these leaders and everyone getting together and say, no, we want to erase all their records. Well, I'm not talking about criminals who get out here, and I'm talking about these group of children, and there's at least 50 of them, okay, who have nothing on their record but those two things. We should be getting together and fighting to have their record cleaned up. It's almost a process to get children in the back of a police car, especially children of color.
Sure.
Now, in fairness to the police, with the new chief, he and I work well together. The new chief, I believe, is really trying. He makes it clear, you stop these people, you stop these kids, have a reason. And I'm saying that simply because I had to do a lot of fighting with the old chief on behalf of our kids of color. And it bothers me so much that our leaders do not do that. They step out halfway, but if they have to get too loud with it, then, oh, my position or this person over here is not going to like it. I don't care.
Sure.
You need to stand up.
So the kind of the buzzword of he's guilty of being black on Cape Cod is a reality. It is true. I mean, it happens a lot of times. I mean, I can really see where that could be. That is a large problem in law enforcement.
Well, they have this thing they call DWB, driving while black. And now
It's not funny.
I umpire
It's not,
softball
but it's
games.
true.
I've done the police league for 25 years on Cape Cod.
Yep.
And I've got to know some of the police.
Sure.
And some of the police are really excellent people.
Yeah.
And they're doing their job. But it's the others that go beyond, while you see 3 guys riding in a car, not breaking no rules, not breaking no laws, but they look suspicious. So now you pull over a car with 3 young black guys, or maybe even 2 black guys and a white kid. It's like, oh, this is an interracial group here. Something is going on. So they pull them over, and from that, whether they get arrested or go to jail or not, the influx of traffic that goes by and see these young individuals pulled over to the side, whatever they did or whatever happened, no one knows, but everyone suspects that these kids were doing something wrong, and they weren't.
No, I mean, and a lot of times, I mean, that could be just youth. And a lot of times, I think today, you mentioned that if historically people understood a little bit more of the legacy of Dr. King, that what he promoted was unity, that we might not have this problem. And I think a lot of times that young people of color, young people of any color, don't understand that you better learn and understand history, or your respect shouldn't be the almighty dollar.
No.
So that makes quite a difference. So I can certainly
on that same note as Martin Luther King wanting unity of the community.
Yes.
Well, if you notice, the younger people if you look at their crew, their group that they hang out with, you could see Spanish,
Yes.
Russian, French, black,
Yes.
Brazilian, all in one group, and that's their crew.
Yeah.
So they are practicing this, but
Right.
some of the youth don't get that message,
Right.
and that's because they alienated one way or another.
Or because they're taught from either at home or how they are treated special in the community, they're not going to give up that. It's creating that same cycle. And, you know, unfortunately, where our leaders and other people, prominent people that are holding prominent positions in this community, don't understand that people want the equality. They want, the average person wants equality. They want to get together with everybody. You know, where the leaders that look at me as a radical, a lot of people that I work with of all races understand exactly where I'm coming from, work with me just fine, understand that I'm going to step out and not care what the next person thinks. As I was saying, even with the new chief of police, he and I may not agree on everything, but we have a great deal of respect for each other. He knows I'm right to the point, okay?
That's so
and when you have those police that I feel still have racial issues of their own,
Sure.
I'm going to bring him right to him. And he addresses it. And my point of bringing all that up is you have to, if you don't get to the core of things, you're going to keep sweeping it under the rug, walking around it. He and I have learned to work directly together on racial issues. If we can get the town council, the museum, other places that are supposed to bring up and deal with racial issues, if they deal with them like an open book, things will get solved.
Absolutely.
And I have to say something that I'm very proud of, and probably why I'm so outspoken and an activist. As everyone knows, Walk to Baboza is my father.
Wonderful.
And now, Walk to Baboza with Dr. King's holiday, he was part of making that a national holiday. He worked directly with Mrs. King when she was actually trying to make it a national holiday. My father was part of that, and working with her directly, and I think that's a nice legacy for him to pass on to his grandchildren.
That's wonderful.
You know, and a lot of people don't know that. I don't know if he'll even mention that, but it's important for me to mention.
Just we are going to have a dialogue with Walter after this, and as many of you who have been watching our airways will certainly have seen Walter do a number of programs. He does Freedom and Economic Democracy program that he's done for a number of years, and so he's one of our a long-time producers and involvement, and a very outspoken and a very articulate gentleman. So we're going to have him on as a piece. So I thank you for mentioning that, because he probably would not mention that
Right.
on his own. A question for both of you. How might have society progressed if Dr. King had not been assassinated? Would we have been in a much better place? Would he have continued to be an advocate? Would we have changed, or would we run into the same problems?
Excuse me. I think had he lived, it would have been drastically different, because his message that he was putting out was going, and that's why the assassination, because he I don't know if it's true, but back then I heard rumors that he was going to be on a Kennedy ticket as vice president. And had he lived,
Would have been amazing.
it would have been an amazing correlation of all that he pushed for, and all that he lived for, and all that he dreamt. But unfortunately, we'll never get to know
We'll
that.
never get to know that for sure.
And again, yes, things would have changed drastically. Also, Dr. King and Malcolm X were also coming together. So you were going to have the best of both worlds. Because while most people see Malcolm X as a racist and the whole 9 yards, what they fail to understand, if they further educated themselves, they would realize that once he went to Mecca, he learned, he educated himself. He now understood about bringing people together. So could you see the power if those two had gotten together?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Things would be different. They would not allow the community, any community, this government, to allow our youth to destroy themselves the way they do. And they only destroy themselves because they don't see self-worth. And they don't see self-worth because the leaders that be refuse to teach it. They don't teach it in the schools. They don't stand up for them in the communities when someone should stand up for them. There is nothing there to tell our youth how valuable they are. You know, so oh yeah, things would have.
Dr. King could have coalesced all those. It seems like a lot of, right after that in '68, the groups splintered. You know, there was a lot of division amongst black organizations and groups, with Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, the Panthers, and the whole variety of things that were in there. So I think that whole, probably bringing those groups together would have been a
I think back then
major impact.
Well, I think back then, for the obvious reasons, a lot of them were afraid because they were targeted, fear of assassination. Okay, now today, it's a new type of assassination. Okay, I think people are afraid to stand up. That's why you have to look at your own character, yourself, your inner self. I know my father has gone through changes just by standing up. I know I go through changes by standing up. I know he does. So you have to say to yourself, can you go home? I can't go home and go to sleep if I watch any human being being mistreated. I'm standing there, I see it, and I do nothing. That's not going to happen. So, and I do thank you for mentioning in the beginning of the program that not only am I a civil rights activist, I am also a human rights activist. That I don't care what the issue is. If you are treating another human being with some type of indignity, I'm going to get involved. And I think more people have to do that.
Right, Jimmy?
That's
a good thing, you know.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Nobody will have peace.
Well, I think human rights really supersede black rights.
Sure.
It's one of those issues that if you don't handle human rights, how can you spot civil rights?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, I mean, they go hand in hand. So if whatever.
We got you good enough.
Yeah. That's a good job. But you know, I think most people that are into civil rights, they automatically align themselves with human rights because everything is not just about black and white.
Sure.
It's about rights for people. When I first went into the military, 1960, it was during those years that they first started to integrate the military barracks, where they would let black guys and white guys camp. I mean, sleep in the same barracks together. And let me tell you, there was issues going on there.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It seems like, and it just seems like it was just so recently. I mean, to me, the 60s seems like last week. And I know that those of us of a certain age, we all feel the same way. But it is, it's interesting to see how these struggles are happening around the world in different places. When we're talking about South Africa and some different things that are going on, that is continuing to be a major problem. Again, we just feel, do you feel, Dr. King, what would he have thought of the status of human and civil rights that are going on right now? Because I think it hasn't gotten a whole lot better since that period of time.
Obviously, he would be very sad, but I would like to believe if he were still alive, they would not be like this.
Yeah.
So that's a very hard question to answer. If he were alive, things would not. He wouldn't allow it, and people wouldn't be afraid to stand up. I would think he would. He had the ability to bring people together. That was his gift.
That's wonderful.
He was able to bring people together. He was able to make people stand up and not be afraid. So you wouldn't have scattered pockets of leaders. You'd have a group.
That's a great
And he would go forth. It would not be this bad. He clearly would have jumped on the bandwagon of making all youth realize how important they are.
Well, that's fabulous.
So,
That's just a fabulous, and we could certainly talk about this for hours and hours, but MaryAnn Baboza, Jimmy Little, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
giving
for
up your
having us.
time and talking. It's
you.
been a pleasure to have you back,
Thank you
Jimmy.
for having
Thank
us.
you. We can continue this dialogue at another date and get it and record it, because it is important for not only our young people to understand these things, but locally
Right.
for people to understand. So we've talked about national, we've talked about international, we've talked a little bit about the local impact of human and civil rights, but I think that it's absolutely critical. And thank you again for doing it. Join us next time on the Profile series. We're going to be carrying this discussion further. So thank you for joining us.
thank you.
Thank you.